It was Tuesday afternoon when I found the box. Just a regular Tuesday. The kind where you wake up, make coffee that's a little too strong, burn your toast slightly, and head to work with the same playlist you've had since 2018. The kind of Tuesday where nothing remarkable is supposed to happen. I had been clearing out Mom's apartment. No, not apartment. Residence. That's what they called the little rooms at Sunset Haven, as if changing the name somehow made it less of what it was. The place where my mother spent her final years, increasingly confused, occasionally lucid, gradually disappearing into the fog of dementia. The staff had been surprisingly patient with me. "Take all the time you need, Mrs. Carlson," they'd say, though their eyes told a different story. 3 weeks was pushing it, even for the sympathetic ones. But I couldn't rush this. Every drawer, every shelf, held memories that ambushed me when I least expected it. That's when I found it, tucked beneath a stack of moth-eaten sweaters in the bottom drawer of her dresser. A carved wooden box, about the size of a hardcover book, with a small brass lock. I'd never seen it before. At least, I didn't think I had. Though lately my own memory has started playing tricks on me. 57 isn't old, but it isn't young either. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight. Solid oak from the look of it, weathered smooth in places, as if someone had worried their fingers over its surface for years. There was no key that I could find, not in the drawer or anywhere else in the room. "Mrs. Carlson." A gentle knock at the door. Nurse Diane, the one with the perpetually sympathetic eyebrows and sensible shoes. "Just checking if you need anything before my shift ends." I quickly slid the box into my purse. "No, I'm fine. Thanks, Diane." "You know, your mother really treasured your visits," she said, lingering in the doorway. "She always lit up when you came, even toward the end." I nodded, swallowing the lie along with the lump in my throat. My visits, all 9 of them in 3 years. 9 visits, while my mother slowly forgot how to recognize faces, how to feed herself, how to exist in a world that no longer made sense to her. After Diane left, I finished packing the last of Mum's clothes into donation bags, her few personal items into a single cardboard box. 3 years in this place, and all that remained could fit in the trunk of my Camry with room to spare. Is that what waits for all of us? I wondered. To be reduced to so little, remembered by so few. I signed the final paperwork at the front desk, nodded at the rehearsed condolences, and walked to my car feeling the weight of the box against my hip. Whatever was inside, letters, photos, keepsakes, I wasn't ready to face it yet. Not here in this parking lot, with the antiseptic smell of the place still clinging to my clothes. That night at home, after a glass of Merlot had softened the edges of the day, I set the box on my kitchen table. The house was quiet. Mark was at his weekly poker game, our son Jason away at college. Just me and this mysterious piece of my mother's life that she'd never shared. I tried every small key I owned, none worked. I rummaged through my toolbox and found a flathead screwdriver. The lock was old, probably not meant to withstand much force. It gave way with a sharp crack that sounded obscenely loud in the empty house. Inside, there was a stack of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, a few black and white photographs, and at the bottom, a small leather journal. The first photograph showed a young woman, my mother, I realized with a start, standing beside a man in an army uniform. They were laughing, her head thrown back, his arm around her waist. I turned it over. Written in faded ink. David and me, July 1962. David? Who the hell was David? My father's name was Robert Elliot Turner. He and Mum had been married for 47 years before his heart gave out while mowing the lawn on a sweltering August day 7 years ago. I'd never heard my mother mention anyone named David. Not once. The second photo showed the same man, David, holding a baby. On the back, David with Sarah, March 1965. I'm Sarah, born March 1965. My hands were shaking now. I untied the ribbon and opened the first letter, postmarked June 1963. My dearest Eleanor, I received your letter yesterday and read it 3 times before I could bring myself to believe what you were saying. A baby? Our baby? I find myself walking around in a daze, smiling for no reason my unit can understand. The letter went on, full of love and plans and promises. I read each one, arranging them by date on the table until they told a story I'd never heard before. A love affair while my father was deployed overseas with the State Department. A pregnancy. Frantic letters as my birth approached. Then, abruptly, the letters stopped. The last one was dated February 1965, a month before I was born. Eleanor, please, one more letter. Just tell me if the baby is healthy. Tell me if it's a boy or girl. I'm dying here not knowing. I understand your decision. I respect that you've chosen to stay with Robert. But please, I'm begging you. Let me know our child is okay. All my love, always, David. With trembling hands, I opened the journal. My mother's handwriting, familiar yet strange in its youthful loops and curves. April 3rd, 1965. Sarah is 3 weeks old today. She has his eyes, those same deep brown eyes that I fell in love with. Robert hasn't noticed. He's so proud, telling everyone she looks just like his mother. I smile and nod and die a little inside with each lie. The doctor says I have postpartum depression. I let them think that's why I cry when I look at her. How could I tell them the truth? That every time I hold her I see David's face, that I made a choice I can't unmake. Robert is a good man. He'll be a good father. He deserves better than what I've done to him. I sat back, the journal clutched to my chest, trying to make sense of what I was reading. The man I'd called Dad my entire life. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle, who adored his grandchildren. Wasn't my father? I flipped forward in the journal, skimming entries until one caught my eye. June 18th, 1966. I saw David today, right there in the grocery store, standing in the produce section holding a cantaloupe like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. My heart stopped. Sarah was in the cart, babbling away, reaching for oranges. He looked up and saw us. The cantaloupe fell from his hands. I thought I was prepared if this ever happened, but I wasn't. I grabbed the cart and fled, Sarah wailing as I practically ran through the store. I caught a glimpse of him following us, calling my name. I didn't stop. I couldn't. When we got home, I sat in the driveway crying until Sarah fell asleep in her car seat. What have I done? What am I doing? I poured another glass of wine, larger this time, and kept reading. The entries were sporadic, sometimes months apart, but David appeared again and again. Apparently he hadn't left town as my mother had thought he would. He'd taken a teaching position at the local community college. Their paths crossed occasionally. At stores, at the park, once at a school function when I was in 3rd grade. October 12th, 1973. Parent-teacher night at Sarah's school. I turned around and there he was, talking to Mrs. Abernathy. He's teaching her son at the college. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my purse, spilling everything. He rushed to help me gather my things, our fingers touching over Sarah's class photo. She's beautiful, he whispered. just like her mother. I couldn't breathe. Robert was only a few feet away, chatting with another parent. 8 years. And still, just the sound of David's voice makes everything inside me tremble. We spoke for less than a minute. He slipped his card into my hand, his home number written on the back. I tore it up as soon as I got home, flushed the pieces down the toilet. I can't. I just can't. The entries continued, chronicling moments of almost encounters, of choices made and unmade. My mother's internal struggle, her guilt, her longing. And through it all, David watched from a distance as I grew up, never approaching me directly, respecting the boundaries my mother had set. May 10th, 1983. Sarah's graduation today. I spotted him in the back of the auditorium. He's greying at the temples now, but still so handsome it makes my chest ache. He didn't try to speak to us, just watched as she accepted her diploma, as Robert hugged her with tears in his eyes. So proud of the daughter he believes is his. David stood and applauded, then slipped away before the ceremony ended. I've made so many mistakes, but seeing Sarah today, confident, brilliant, ready to conquer the world, I can't regret the choice I made. She's had stability, love, a father who adores her. Would life with David have given her those things? Or would our love have burned too bright, consumed everything in its path, including her? I had to stop reading. My head was spinning, filled with snapshots of a childhood now cast in an entirely different light. Had there been clues? Signs I'd missed? I thought of my father. No, Robert. And how he'd always supported my interest in literature, despite being a practical, numbers-oriented accountant himself. I'd assumed I was just different, taking after some distant relative, perhaps. But now I wondered if my love of books, of poetry, had come from this stranger. This David, who'd apparently been watching from the shadows my entire life. I picked up the final photograph from the box. It showed an older David, probably in his 60s, sitting on a park bench. The image was taken from a distance, as if my mother had secretly photographed him. On the back, in handwriting that trembled with age, "The road not taken, 2010. Was he still alive? A quick calculation. If he'd been around my mother's age, he'd be in his early 80s now. I could search for him. David. What? I didn't even know his last name. I returned to the journal, flipping forward to the more recent entries. My mother's handwriting had deteriorated, becoming shakier as the years passed. The entries became less frequent, more confused. The early stages of the dementia that would eventually claim her. September 3rd, 2017. I saw David today. At least I think it was today. He was standing in my kitchen when I came downstairs, making coffee the way he used to in that little apartment. But when I blinked, it was Sarah there, looking worried. "Mum, who were you talking to?" she asked. I couldn't tell her. How could I ever tell her? The doctor says I'm slipping. Such a gentle word for such a terrifying thing. My memories are all I have left of him, and now they're betraying me too, blurring and shifting until I can't tell what's real anymore. I should tell Sarah the truth while I still can, before the words slip away along with everything else. But what would it accomplish now? Only pain, only confusion. Better to let her remember Robert as her father. He earned that right in all the ways that matter. The last entry was dated just a few months before she moved into Sunset Haven, when living alone had become too dangerous. November 18th, 2019. Sarah came by today. She's arranging for me to move to some facility, taking away my home, my independence. She thinks I don't understand, but I do. I see the fear in her eyes when I call her by the wrong name, when I leave the stove on, when I wander out in my nightgown. I showed her the photo albums today, hoping to remind her of who I was before I became this frightened, confused old woman. We looked at pictures of her childhood, of family vacations, of Robert teaching her to fish. She sat beside me on the couch, patient, kind. So like him sometimes, that same crease between her eyebrows when she concentrates. The box is still hidden in my dresser. Some days I forget it exists. Other days it's all I can think about. What will happen to it when I'm gone? Will Sarah find it? Will she hate me for the lie I've lived? Or will it remain locked forever, buried with me, the truth dying along with my memories? I think David is gone now. I read an obituary last year. At least, I think I did. Sometimes I confuse things I've read with things I've dreamed, but I'm almost certain. Professor David Winters, aged 79. The name feels right. There was a memorial service at the college. I couldn't go, of course. What would I have said? Hello, I kept your daughter from you for 54 years. If there's a heaven, will Robert be waiting for me there? Will he know what I did? Will he forgive me? Or will David be there instead, still waiting for an explanation I'm not sure I can give? I closed the journal, my mind reeling. David Winters. I had a name now. I could look him up, confirm whether he was really gone, maybe find out more about the man whose blood ran through my veins. The sound of the garage door opening startled me. Mark was home. I quickly gathered the letters and photos, stuffing them back into the box. I wasn't ready to share this with anyone, not even my husband of 30 years. I needed time to process, to decide what this meant, not just for me, but for my children too. What would Jason think, learning at 21 that the grandfather he'd adored wasn't his biological grandfather after all? Hey, babe, Mark called, hanging his keys by the door. How'd it go at your mum's place? He stopped when he saw my face. Sarah? What's wrong? Nothing, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired. It was emotionally draining. He nodded, accepting this explanation easily. After all, I'd just cleaned out my dead mother's room. Of course I was upset. Well, don't stay up too late, he said, kissing the top of my head. You know how you get when you're overtired. I waited until he'd gone upstairs before reopening the box. There, at the very bottom, was something I'd missed. A small envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a key and a slip of paper with an address scrawled in my mother's handwriting. Below it, 4 words that made my heart stutter. If you find this. My mother had known I might discover the box someday, and she'd left me a key to… what? Another box? A storage unit? A safe deposit box? The address was about 20 miles away, in a part of town I rarely visited. I could go tomorrow, see what was waiting for me there. Or I could put the box away, pretend I'd never found it, continue living the life I thought was mine. But I already knew which choice I would make, the same choice my mother had faced all those years ago, standing in a grocery store with me babbling in the cart. The moment of truth, when the carefully constructed narrative of your life suddenly reveals itself to be built on sand. I would go. I had to go. Because even at 57, you're never too old to discover that the story of your life has an entire chapter you never knew existed. And sometimes, the most important truths are hidden in locked boxes, waiting for someone brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to break them open. The storage facility looked like it had been built sometime in the late 70s and hadn't seen much maintenance since. A faded sign reading "Secure Store" hung crookedly above a small office with dusty windows. The whole place had the neglected feel of a business barely hanging on. Inside, a young man with a patchy beard glanced up from his phone. "Help you?" I showed him the key. "I believe my mother had a unit here. Eleanor Turner?" He tapped lazily at an ancient computer. "Turner. Yeah. Unit 117. Paid up through next year." He pointed toward a door. "Down the hall. Make a right. It'll be on your left." The hallway smelled of mildew and old paper. Unit 117 was small, one of those half-sized storage closets meant for a few boxes, not furniture. The key slid into the lock smoothly, as if it had been recently oiled. Inside was a single cardboard box. I knelt beside it, my knees protesting against the concrete floor. Unlike the chaotic collection in the wooden box, this one was meticulously organized. On top was a letter addressed to me in my mother's familiar handwriting, steadier than her last journal entries, probably written before the dementia took hold. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've found the box in my dresser and followed the breadcrumbs I left behind. I'm sorry for the deception, both the lifetime of it and this final mystery I've set before you. I've tried many times to tell you the truth face to face, but courage failed me each time. Yes, David Winters is your biological father. Yes, Robert raised you as his own, never knowing the truth. I made a terrible, selfish choice when I was young, and then compounded it with a lifetime of silence. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope you might eventually understand." David was incandescent. He burned so brightly it was almost painful to look at him directly. We met when I was working at the library downtown, and he came in searching for obscure poetry to quote in his dissertation. Robert and I were already engaged, a sensible match approved by both families. But with David, I felt alive in a way I never had before. The affair lasted 8 months. When I discovered I was pregnant, I panicked. Robert had been deployed overseas for nearly a year. There was no way I could pass the child off as his. I was going to run away with David, start a new life. At least, that was the plan. Then, Robert came home unexpectedly, injured in a diplomatic incident that made the newspapers. He was in pain, physically and emotionally. He talked about the comfort of knowing he had me to come home to, how thoughts of our future together had kept him going through the darkest moments. I couldn't leave him then. I just couldn't. I told him I was pregnant, letting him believe we'd conceived during his brief leave the previous summer. He was overjoyed. And I wrote to David and told him it was over, that I'd lost the baby, that he should move on with his life. He didn't. As you now know, he stayed, watched you grow up from a distance, respected my wishes, even though they broke his heart. What kind of strength must that have taken? To see your child and never claim her. I'm not sure I could have done the same in his position. In this box, you'll find everything I know about David Winters, his academic publications, newspaper clippings about his work, the books of poetry he published over the years. Yes, your love of literature comes from him. There's an album of photographs I collected secretly, documenting the parallel life we might have had. There's also a letter from David to you. He wrote it years ago and entrusted it to me, making me promise that someday you would read it. Another promise I failed to keep. David passed away 3 years ago. The obituary is included here as well. I attended his memorial service at the college, sitting in the back row. No one there knew who I was. His colleagues spoke of his brilliance, his kindness, his dedication to his students. No one mentioned a great love or a child. No one knew he'd spent his life with an empty space at his table, an absence he could never fill. I don't know if this knowledge will bring you peace or pain, perhaps both. All I can tell you is that you were loved, fiercely, completely, by two fathers, one who raised you and one who watched over you from afar. With all my love and deepest regrets, Mum. I sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit, the letter trembling in my hands, and began to cry. Not delicate tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that echoed in the narrow hallway. I cried for my mother, trapped in a lie of her own making. For Robert, the only father I'd ever known, who'd gone to his grave never suspecting the truth. For David Winters, the stranger whose blood ran in my veins, who'd loved me enough to let me go. And I cried for myself, for the life I'd lived and the life I might have had, for the half of my identity that had been hidden from me for 57 years. When the storm passed, I wiped my eyes and began to carefully unpack the box. There were the academic publications, articles with titles like Recurring Symbolism in Early American Poetry and Transformative Power of Metaphor in Grief Literature. A small collection of poetry volumes published between 1972 and 2010, each bearing David's name on the spine. And photographs. So many photographs. David at academic conferences. David receiving teaching awards. David in what appeared to be his home office, surrounded by books. And occasionally surreptitiously taken photos of David at my life events. Graduation, from a distance. My wedding, barely visible at the edge of a group shot. Even my son's high school graduation. An elderly David standing at the back of the auditorium, watching his grandson, without ever being able to claim him. At the bottom of the box was a sealed envelope with my name written on it in unfamiliar handwriting. David's letter. I broke the seal with trembling fingers. Dear Sarah, how strange to write those words, knowing you may never read them. Your mother has promised to give you this letter someday, though I suspect someday may never come. Still, I write with hope. I've watched you grow from afar, a shadow in your life, rather than the father I longed to be. I've seen you transform from a curious little girl who asked why about everything into a thoughtful, compassionate woman who still seeks answers to life's deepest questions. I'd like to think you got that from me, though perhaps that's just an old man's vanity. I want you to know that I respect the choice your mother made. Was I angry at first? Devastated? Of course. But over time, I came to understand. Robert gave you stability, security, a normal life, free from scandal and whispers. In the 1960s, that meant something different than it does today. Did I ever consider telling you the truth myself? Yes, 1,000 times. There were moments, like when I saw you in the campus library your sophomore year of high school, struggling with a research paper on Walt Whitman. I was shelving books nearby. A pretense. I'd seen you come in and followed. I so badly wanted to sit down beside you, to guide you through Song of Myself, and show you how Whitman's words could unlock something inside you. Instead, I anonymously left a book of critical essays on your table while you were getting water. You looked confused when you returned, but you opened it anyway. I watched from behind the stacks as your face lit up, finding exactly the quote you needed. Little moments like that were all I allowed myself. Small nudges, gentle course corrections from a distance. Was it enough? No, not nearly. But it was all I had. I don't know what you'll feel upon learning about me. Anger, perhaps. Confusion. Maybe even curiosity. All would be valid. I hope, though, that you won't judge your mother too harshly. She made an impossible choice in a different time. And despite everything, she gave you a good life, didn't she? If you're interested in knowing more about me, my papers and personal effects will have been donated to the college library by the time you read this. The librarian, Marianne Costas, was a dear friend. If you mention my name, she'll help you access anything you wish to see. I've lived a full life, traveled widely, taught thousands of students, published works I'm proud of, but there has always been a Sarah-shaped hole in the center of everything, a space where you should have been. You are loved, Sarah. You have always been loved. By the father who raised you, and by the father who had to love you from afar. With all my heart, David Winters. I sat in that storage unit for hours, reading through every paper, examining every photograph, absorbing this new reality, one artifact at a time. By the time I finally repacked everything and closed the door, the sun was setting. I drove home slowly, my mind so full of new information that it felt like it might overflow at any moment. Mark would be worried. I'd left without telling him where I was going. But how could I explain this? How could I possibly convert this earthquake into casual conversation? Hey, honey, guess what? I just found out my entire life is based on a lie. The man I thought was my father isn't. My mother had an affair with a poetry professor, and, surprise, I'm the result. Oh, and my biological father stalked our family from a distance my entire life. What's for dinner? As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Jason's car parked at the curb. Our son must have decided to come home from college for the weekend, something about a surprise visit he'd mentioned last week that I'd completely forgotten. I sat in my car, staring at our house, the home Mark and I had built together over 30 years of marriage. Inside were the two people I loved most in the world. They were waiting for me, expecting the same Sarah who had left this morning. Not this new person, this stranger carrying a cardboard box filled with an alternate version of her life. What would I tell them? When would I tell them? Should I tell them at all? I thought of my mother, carrying her secret for decades until dementia finally, mercifully, allowed her to forget. I thought of Robert, who'd loved me unconditionally, never suspecting I wasn't his biological child. And I thought of David Winters, watching from the shadows, loving me enough to stay away. 3 parents, each making choices they believed were right, each living with the consequences. Now it was my turn to choose. I took a deep breath, picked up the smaller wooden box from the passenger seat, and left the cardboard box in the trunk. One step at a time. Tonight, I would be the mother and wife my family expected. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of integrating these 2 versions of myself, the Sarah who had been, and the Sarah who might have been. As I walked toward the front door, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The truth, even a difficult truth, has its own kind of freedom. For 57 years, I'd been living in a story with missing pages. Now, finally, I had the whole book in my hands. I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside, ready to start the next chapter. "Mum," Jason called from the kitchen. "Where have you been? Dad said you disappeared all day." "I've been—" I paused, searching for the right words. "I've been finding some things I didn't know I'd lost." And that, at least, was nothing but the truth.